Hi, this is Sandra from Mobius Girl Design. I'm back today with another installment in my series of Marguerite crochet along tip or tutorial videos. In this video, I'm going to show you a little bit about how to carry the yarn when you're working both the half and the quarter motifs. The principles are basically the same as working with the full motifs, of course, with the exception that we're working in rows now, turned at the end of each row instead of rounds. So here I have one of the half motifs. I've worked the first row, which is basically just 7 crochets worked into a magic ring. And I'm going to go ahead and chain 2 and turn, which is what I do at the end of every round. So now I'm ready to make my first stitch, which goes in the same stitch, or in the first stitch here. And in this second row, just like in the full motifs, I have lots of color switching going back and forth, basically on every other stitch, so it gets a little fiddly, but it certainly gets easier as you go on. So I've done my yarn over in my new yarn color, and I pull through. If this is confusing for you, you might want to go back to watch the first tapestry crochet tutorial video where I go into things like how to change colors in a little more depth. For now, I'm just going to keep on working my second row. So in this row, I switch back and forth between on every switch, on every stitch, I switch colors. So I'm just going to go ahead and work my way across here. See if I can pay attention to what I'm doing and talk at the same time. So again, I'm going to work over my carry color, giving it just a slight little tug every time I switch to make sure that the stitches are kind of lined up right next to each other. In this row, I've got 1 stitch of each color in the corresponding stitch below on row 1. So going back and forth, and in the same way that I did with the full motifs, I'm trying to keep 1 color to the front and 1 color to the back in order to prevent my yarns from getting too tangled. So about halfway done here. Just going to keep working all the way to the end. I have to say while I'm stitching here that I've been having so much fun seeing all of everybody's motifs, both on my Facebook group, Mobius Girl Crochet Nation, and also on the Ravelry group hosted by Julie Yeager. There's also some great examples of different types of yarns, different types of color combinations, pretty much everything that you could possibly imagine. All right, so now I'm getting here to my last stitch. I've done all of my repeats. Let me just count here to make sure. Yep, and now I'm going to put my last stitch here in color A into my last stitch of row 1. Now here's where the carrying yarn part happens, and it's a little bit different because for the full motifs I always finish my last stitch of the round by switching colors, but for the half and the quarter motifs I'm not going to switch colors before I turn rounds, but rather after. So I'm going to do my chain 2, turn my work. And now I'm going to bring my carry color, the cream in this case, up from behind, just like that. So seen from the side, I'm going to pull it up and behind my hook. And the reason I do that is to make sure again that I catch it as I'm working along and don't have it sticking out too much where I don't want it to be. So for this row, my first stitch is made in color A. Now you can see where I've carried the yarn up along the side of the motif. And I'm just going to keep going here. So I'm going to switch to B and make my stitches. I'll go to the end of this round and then this row, and I'll show you one more carry. And then I think we can move on from there. So again, making the half and the full motifs is very, very similar, of course, in the sense of the tapestry crochet techniques used. Very similar as working the full motifs. The only difference being that I'm working in rows now instead of in rounds. Oops, I forgot to change my color, so I'm going to back up a little bit. Change my color and keep going. It's also been fun to read people's comments on working the full motifs when they're maybe finding it to be a little bit difficult at first, especially if you're new to tapestry crochet. But people really have been getting the hang of how to work these motifs really quite quickly. At least that's the appearance that I'm getting from the groups that I just mentioned. So it's fun for a lot of people. It's a new technique. It's something that you need to practice a bit to work up the muscle memory to get used to doing it. But once you get used to it, there really are all kinds of possibilities that open up in terms of different kinds of designs. All right, so now I am almost to the end of my row. I'm going to do my last color change. Again, for the half and the quarter motifs, I'm always going to end the row with my color A. I'm not going to switch colors until after I turn my work. So here I've got, just a tail end hanging out here, which I can, of course, sew in later, so I don't have to worry about that right now. So now I'm ready to do my next turn. So I chain 2, turn the piece. Now you can see that the carry yarn kind of gets pulled over to the other side when I turn. All I want to do is get some more slack here first. When I carry the yarn up to the top, I just want to bring it to the back of the work so that when I make my first stitch, I'm indeed working over that yarn. You can kind of see I have the carry yarn on top of my hook, and now I'm ready to make my first stitch and then to change my colors, just as it says in the pattern. So that's the basics of how to carry your yarn, especially when turning at the end of the round, for the half and the quarter motifs. The technique is exactly the same for the quarter motifs. It's just a smaller one to work up. So I won't be including that in the video. But if you look down below after you're done watching this video, there will be another one on how to join up the half and the quarter motifs. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there, and remember, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me by email or on Facebook or Ravelry, and I hope you have fun making the half and the quarter motifs.